Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Michael Zuber, one rental at a time. It is Wednesday. You know what that means. That means we are so lucky and honored and have the opportunity to speak with an amazing investor, Anna Kelly. Hi, Anna.
Hi, great to be here today.
Yes, I am so excited for our three topics today. And the first one comes from your Facebook post, which I think went out yesterday. It might have been the day before. You had a sit down with your oldest child. And let's talk about that because you talked about money. He had some good questions, and it sounds like you got to an interesting place at the end. So tell us about it.
Sure. So, if y'all haven't seen our episode where my son Dane came on, go look at the playlist and watch that. So, he is a freshman in college and he grew up the son of a real estate investor. And he said for years, I hate real estate. I'm doing anything but real estate, right? Because he saw the blood, sweat, and tears that was required in the beginning. And suddenly, about his sophomore, maybe his junior year in high school, he's like, this really paid off, Mom, didn't it? I'm like, yeah, it did, So he's been interested in real estate, but, focused on other things. And he finally said, yes, I want to go full-time real estate. Don't want to go to college. It's a waste of time. So we kind of negotiated. This will bring you to the point of all of this. And I said, listen, I want you to still go to college, get a degree, get the life experience, get a finance degree. You said, take that speech class, right? Learn some emotional intelligence, relational intelligence, and those things. And then I'll teach you about the real estate. And he's like, great, but I want to start now. I want to start investing now and not waste 4 years in college and not be ahead. So I said, what is your favorite niche? What do you think you want to do? He's like, vacation rentals, because we have a few, right? Well, thank God, the timing is perfect. He's in school in Pensacola, Florida. Well, guess where the most profitable place to own a vacation rental in the United States is right now? Pensacola, Florida. So we're looking at vacation rentals together. So he's home and he's been real busy. And we've talked about, I'm looking at these deals. You need to come sit down with me and let's analyze them, right? Well, he's been busy. So I've looked at deals. I've got one under contract. I got another one we've offered on, hopefully under contract today. And I said, if this goes through, you're going to be the manager. You're going to need to figure this out, put the systems in place. And this is the one you can learn on. Mom's going to own it, but you can learn on it and be paid to manage it. And in order to do that, you need to learn why it makes sense, why vacation rentals, if that's what you want to do. So I said, let's sit down and look at the property, look at the numbers and show you what a profitable investment looks like and why we're doing this property. So as we did that, he's like, oh, I got this question and this question and this question. Asked a lot more questions than I thought he would. But he's like, why are you buying one as a second home and one as an investment property? So that was the first thing is, they're financed differently. So we had a conversation of when you buy vacation rentals or any kind of investment property, you really have to understand the financing and the impact of how much you're putting down and what that does to your cash on cash return. So essentially, the less money you have to put down, the higher your return is on that investment. So when interest rates are super low and they're below inflation, I said, you want to borrow as much as you possibly can, as long as it cash flows enough to pay all the expenses and the mortgage and have at least 20 to 30% extra on top. The banks consider it very safe. My experience is that it's very safe and it makes sense. But he said, I heard it's better to pay off all your mortgages and be debt free. That's what dad says. That's what grandma says. You're the only one saying not to. So we had the conversation of when is leverage in real estate safe, right? When is it a good idea? And how can it juice your returns to allow you to grow your portfolio and cash flow to create financial freedom? So that's how we got started on the conversation. And from there, we talked about, inflation adjusted spread on the mortgage rate versus what, the cost of that money from inflation and opportunity cost of, leaving equity in a deal versus taking it out and using it to buy more cash flow. What's safer, right? So that's what we talked about. And it was a great conversation. At the end, he goes, I'm totally quitting school after the second year. There's no need. I'm not learning any of this stuff. You can teach me everything that I know. I'm ready to go. So that was a huge win. Not that I want him to quit school. We'll still talk about that. But it was a huge win that he was like, I see it now on paper. I'm ready and willing to actually listen and do and excited for the first time.
Wow. Yeah, I'm guessing you didn't start that conversation thinking you were going to talk your son out of a 4-year degree.
No,
That's a conversation for a different day.
It is. Yeah.
But that is so interesting. So he's 18, right?
Yes. Just turned 18 this summer.
So he's 18. I'm trying to remember when I was 18. So I don't know that I was thinking about debt at all. At least it's interesting to think about, what he was hearing, right? Grandma, dad, debt is bad, free and clear, a la Dave Ramsey, right? That's very, very much Dave Ramsey speak. So he probably didn't really understand why debt was bad, right? Like 18% credit cards versus 3%. He didn't understand the intricacies, but he came in with the baggage that debt is, and I'm not sure that's a horrible thing. It's probably better than the opposite, but
Right.
you were starting, I don't know, from a -2, right? You had to go through that and bring them forward. So I know you had a spreadsheet, you shared it on Facebook. But how did that go, right? Because he came in like debt is bad and he left with, I'm out. There had to be a transition.
There's a fine balance, right? And I think we've talked a little bit about debt. That would be a whole nother amazing show, just to do in the context of this environment. But, there's a proverb that says the borrower is slave to the lender. If you borrow money and you can't pay it back, you're going to work and slave away your time just to pay it off, right? And it's why buying consumer debt that we then have to work for 3 years to pay off our car payments and boat payments and all that is really stupid, right? So I've taught him debt is a really powerful tool and a really terrible master, right? I don't want to go into any kind of debt that has control over me. I only want to go into the type of debt that's going to give me more freedom and use it and control it to grow me more in a low risk mitigated way, right? We did the Dave Ramsey thing for years, and it served us well because we had a car payment and a house payment and a school payment and then another car payment. And we had too much debt and the payments were more than what we could bring in. You lose a job, you're 1 month away from disaster. And we experienced that. Then we called Dave Ramsey and we said, we're debt free, right? We actually talked to him. We were one of those people.
Wow.
And I was so thankful for the foundation that he laid for most people that are not yet financially free, that have way more debt than they have money. I still recommend Dave Ramsey to get started, right? But we part in some ways where there's debt. To give him credit, just a quick little story.
Sure.
Before we decided to move to Pennsylvania and start a big business, I said, we're debt free, but is business debt different, right? We want to start our business with about a $250,000 SBA loan so we can get started. And he said, don't do it. Don't do it. I've lost it all before. We're at the height of the economy, but it could change. Don't do it. Just slowly work for someone else till you save enough money to do it. And I thought, we're smarter than that. We have to spend money to make money. We went in a lot of debt and it burned us, Michael. And for years, the reason I wasn't home with my kids, even though I was building up this cash flow with real estate, is because we had so much business debt we had to pay off and come out from under, that I'm still really conservative about debt, right? I do view certain types of debt for real estate to be much, much safer than those things that have no proven capacity for success. Most new businesses fail. So you don't want lots of debt when you haven't proven out that the business can sustain you. But what I found about cash flowing rental property is that there's a proven business model for decades and decades and decades, that if you buy well-placed properties in economically strong areas that have a lot of demand for housing and not enough supply, my cash flow and rent is always going to be full and it's always going to pay the debt on that property. So I'm very comfortable with highly leveraging to the point that banks will let me, 80% leverage, let's say, on cash flowing rentals in well-placed areas, because I can create more safety by using it to create more cash flow versus not using it and feeling safe, but not really being safe. And that's the conversation we had yesterday about debt.
Yeah, I thought that was a very powerful quote in your post that I want to scratch again. Feeling safe versus being safe. Talk more about that. And how did Dane kind of feel about that? Because that could easily be kind of like cursed over, like, oh, I get it, but you really don't get it.
That's why I did the spreadsheet. So we were just looking at a property analysis spreadsheet. Then he threw all these questions at me that I didn't expect. So I said, let's open a new tab and I'll show you in real time. So I just created a spreadsheet that said, okay, look, he's like, why would you take a second mortgage? Because you're going to like double your mortgage payment. And that's not safe. Now, if something happens, we have double the mortgage payment. So I went on and I said, okay, let's look at it. So my mortgage payment's like 440. It was 440. It might be 430 now is what I owe, 430,000. My mortgage payment's a little more than 1,700 a month. Now the house is worth about $1 million. We've put some money into it. And I want to take some of that money that I put into it out so I can invest. So I said, people say pay down your house because it makes them feel safe. And the reason it makes them feel safe is if the economy crashes, I lose a job, everything, at least I can't lose my house because I don't owe any money on it. I don't have to worry about making that $1,700 a month payment, right? And here's the thing, in our grandparents' generation, and even some of our parents' generation, a lot of those were one income households. The male was the sole breadwinner. If they lost a job in the town that they lived in, grew up in, and only place they knew, and they couldn't replace their job, they could lose everything, right? And their mortgage payments, the interest rates back then they were double digit. They were much, much higher. So a mortgage payment was the single largest expense that any of those families had. And if they lost a job, they could lose their house. So there was a real safety issue there. We're though now in an environment where interest rates are extremely low, right? And I can make triple the amount on that mortgage payment or quadruple the amount of my mortgage payment by investing my equity and borrowing it at sub-4 interest rates that are below inflation. So I'm not saying it's always a great idea to use your equity and go invest. When inflation is 3 and interest rates were 7 or 8, you're losing money in inflation by having the debt to some extent, plus you have a high payment. But today we're in a unique time where is it safe for me to get rid of my $1,750 a month mortgage payment and I'll feel better that I don't have it, right? But what creates more safety? Saving $1,750 or creating another $10,000 a month in income that can afford to pay for the mortgage payment plus food and groceries and vacations and all these other things. The reality is when you put it on paper and I say, I can have all this money that makes me feel safe and I've got all this equity, but it's not doing anything, right? And it can go away if values of the property go down and feel good that I don't have a $1,700 payment, or I can have a $1,700 payment and feel and be safer because now net of that payment, I showed them a real-time example of a property we could go buy today, right? I could net an extra $129,000 a year by borrowing at 3.5%. I'm going to be much safer having a 6-figure net income come in because of the use of my leverage on my house than I am just not having $1,750 of an extra payment.
Yeah. So one of the things that I used to talk about when I was a salesperson, and more specifically when I was a leader of salespeople and training them, was what I call light bulb moments. There's always a time, at least in most of the sales cycles I was a part of, where you saw it go off in your clients. So you're with your son, he's 18 years old. He comes in with this debt is bad. You open a new tab, you start running through the numbers. When did you see the light bulb? Because I'm sure you saw it and everything turned 180. Where were you in the spreadsheet? What was it?
So the first was like, oh, if I put less money down, I can buy double the property and have double the income because I'm buying 2 properties for a 10% down payment instead of 1 for a 20%. And how that adds, instead of $10,000 a year net on 1 property, I could use the same money to create $20,000 a year net on 2, just like it. So that was like, oh, you mean I could make 20 grand a year buying 2 vacation rentals with very little money down? I'm like, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, I like these vacation rentals. Now, the next part was really when I showed that by not having that payment, I was saving $1,750 a month, but that having $1 million house doesn't do anything for me. We live it.
Dead money.
It's dead money. It's not doing anything. But when I showed by just taking equity from the house that I already own and creating I think it was $129,000 a year in income by buying 1 investment property using that money that I took out as equity as the down payment, when it creates about $129,000 a year, when I said, and that pays for your school and pays for vacations or another $1 million property every single year for the next 30 years. So do I save $9,000 a month in interest on that 300 and something thousand equity? Or do I create in 10 years, $1.3 million of cash that most of us work a lifetime to create that nest egg? That was, I think, when the light bulb was like, wow, right? So when you see that I can create $1 million of income plus in 10 years by having a $1,750 a month payment, which one of you wouldn't pay someone $1,750 a month to be able to get $1 million in 10 years?
I do that a couple times.
It's a no-brainer. And that doesn't even include the fact that I'm borrowing. It's the bank's money taking the inflation hit, not mine.
Yes.
So the second piece was, okay, all this 800,000 in value, when inflation is 7% and my rate is 3%, the value of that equity is being decreased. Where when you're using the bank's money, not only are you making this 129 a year or whatever, but I'm making 4% interest on the money that I'm putting down because it's not being eaten away by inflation that's at 7%.
Yeah.
And that was another like, okay, I'm quitting school.
Yeah.
Like, not yet, baby, not yet. But
yeah,
you know.
that's exactly where I was going. Listening to you do this, I could see the light bulbs going on and getting brighter. And frankly, his response is probably what a lot of us would have. It's like, Mom, I'm done. Mom, this is I'm going all in. I'm surprised he gave you 2 years, but I guess so.
And here's the thing, because there's probably some of you are going to have kids that are thinking the same thing, right? Or somebody think, should I go back and get my MBA and things like that, right? And the reality is, I recognize that even though I had a management degree and I had an accounting minor and I went through a financial advisory school and worked with the wealthiest of wealthiest with investments, no one ever taught me how to handle personal debt and use it to grow. No one. Or how do you structure real estate deals to maximize your cash on cash return? No one. So I am fully confident that if my son quit college now, I could teach him everything he needs to know to become a millionaire really quickly and never need an education. But there's the intangible things that I want him to think about, right? And one of the things we talked about was he grew up in a small rural area in Pennsylvania. It's Amish country, right? And everybody kind of thinks alike, acts alike, looks alike, behaves alike. To some extent, there's like, homogenous generational thinking. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in a very multicultural, diverse area in Houston, Texas. And I think that there's value in saying, let me put you with a lot of people that are very different from you. You need to learn to respect and value people that are very different. You could disagree with them, but by being around people that think differently and challenge you to think differently, you'll become a better person. You'll become a more well-rounded person. So, and having to struggle through taking 17 hours a semester and doing some work, it takes grit, and he's exhausted all the time from studying and sports. So it teaches some life balance and schedule balancing. It's really for those purposes, just to help him mature in a different environment and become a man away from mom and dad, that I think there's still value in that college. But one last thing for people that didn't hear it before, part of the deal was if you go there, what mom pays for college is less than half of what I would pay for you to go to a 4-year school where you'd be not getting an education, right? That's worth the $100,000. And instead, I'll gift you the down payment on your first real estate property. So it's kind of the best of both worlds, sending him to a small Christian college, challenged in his faith, around other people. He happens to be in Pensacola, which is the most profitable place to own a vacation rental. And he wants to do vacation rentals. So it was really a good win-win that allows him to have that education that's going to teach him the intangibles, still look good on paper when he wants to have investors like I do, investing millions of dollars with you. That degree still means a lot to some of them, but still give him the real-time experience. So I'm not anti-college, but I do realize it's not where he's going to learn what he needs to about wealth, and it's not going to make him wealthy.
Yeah, this is amazing stuff. This has been a great conversation. How can people find you and get part of your world?
Great. You can follow me here every Wednesday in our playlist. You can follow me at my website, ariamon.com. And if you're interested in investing passively as an accredited investor in apartment buildings, greaterpurposecapital.com is my website there. And I'm all over social media as Anna Kelly, REI Mom.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.